If 30 years ago, the economic heart of America was the row of shops on Main Street, then in 2025, that heart is beating in the RV parking lots behind Walmart supermarkets. It's not because Americans suddenly prefer freedom on four wheels, but because hundreds of thousands of unemployed workers are turning to a mobile home as a last resort. When 120,000 jobs disappear in just a few months, when the average wage doesn't budge an inch for an entire decade, and when the cost of living skyrockets like a cliff, the crisis is no longer just on the statistics tables. It was once said that small businesses are the backbone of the American economy. The problem is, when the spine breaks, the whole body collapses. And that's exactly what's happening. More than half of small businesses report being unable to maintain cash flow for the next 30 days. A wave of quiet closures spread from rural towns to major cities, sweeping away jobs, income, and even the fragile social stability that had been hoped for after the pandemic. This crisis doesn't resemble a traditional economic recession. It's not noisy. It didn't start on Wall Street. It started with locked roll-up doors, empty warehouses, and families forced to survive within a few square meters of metal. In today's video, we'll delve into the heart of that collapse, why it began, how it spread, and why RV parks, not industrial areas, became the new symbol of the American economy in crisis. Because perhaps when small businesses fall, America not only loses jobs, but also loses its very backbone. The loss of 120,000 jobs in just 1 month is not a statistical anomaly. It was a big enough stumble to wipe out nearly half of Orlando, Florida's population from the labor market right after a jobs report. And the most concerning thing is, this evaporation isn't happening among weak or loss-making businesses, but is falling directly into what was once considered the most stable foundation of the American economy, small businesses. At the same time, medium and large businesses are still increasing hiring. The employment curve doesn't fall completely. It only breaks at one point, the most fragile section. This contrast shows that the labor market is not weakening in a broad cyclical way, but is cracking in its most fragile spot, where every small fluctuation in costs becomes a direct blow to the survival of businesses. When total private employment decreased by 32,000, the market didn't just slow down, it reversed course, from weak growth to actual contraction. This is even more alarming when the three main pillars, manufacturing, information, and professional services, are simultaneously reducing their workforce. It's not just job losses in low-wage sectors, but a simultaneous drain of skills and intellectual capital, a true multi-layered whole. Small businesses account for nearly 46% of the American workforce. That means when this platform sheds 120,000 jobs, every community with a local business as its cornerstone feels the same shockwave. No industry is exempt. From restaurants, salons, and small workshops to professional service companies, all are caught in the contracting spiral. More dangerously, half of small businesses admit they won't have enough cash flow to stay open for more than 30 days if revenue continues to decline. When resilience hits rock bottom, job losses are no longer a consequence. They become a harbinger of the next wave of closures. From here, the domino effect becomes clear. Job losses, reduced income. Reduced income leads to lower local consumption. Lower consumption weakens small business revenue, forcing them to continue cutting staff. A self-tightening closed circle with no pivot point to spring open. What makes this vortex dangerous is its scale. Small businesses make up 99.9% of all US companies and contribute over 40% to GDP. If this area slides, the economy doesn't lose a piece, it loses its foundation. And when small businesses, which have been the source of over half of all new jobs throughout the decade, began to pull down employment figures, it wasn't an isolated phenomenon. That's a sign of a structure reversing. Areas dependent on local services, especially satellite towns around major cities, are being hit the hardest. As shops closed and on-site jobs disappeared, These areas became new labor depressions. Little work, little consumption, few opportunities for recovery. If this decline continues, the US could enter a long-term period of job contraction, where small businesses shrink and large corporations absorb more market share. This not only weakens the labor market, but also accelerates economic concentration, leading to a loss of the diversity and competitiveness that are the very DNA of the American economy. Therefore, the solution does not lie in short-term support packages. Small businesses need to reduce fixed cost pressure, have easier access to capital, and need enough time to adapt before being further eroded by operating costs and declining demand. This is a structural problem. It can't be solved with temporary fixes. But this is only the tip of the iceberg of the crisis, because even those who have kept their jobs are seeing their real incomes fall behind the cost of living. Wages haven't increased, but the prices of everything are constantly rising, and that's the door to the next level of crisis. Flat wages, when income no longer keeps pace with the cost of living. American incomes are still rising, but the problem is, everything else is increasing faster. When wages only inch up by small percentages, while electricity bills, food, and rent soar year after year, a feeling of suffocation sets in even for those who thought they were stable. This is no longer a story of the unemployed. This is the reality for those who are still going to work every day. The average salary increase for job holders is currently only around 4.4%, while the prices of goods and services have risen by over 24% in just a few years. That difference is enough to silently erode real income. Job changers, the most advantaged group, are now only seeing a 6 to 6.3% increase, much lower than the wage jumping period that workers once relied on to escape inflation. While wages have stagnated, rental prices have increased by over 30% since 2019. This increase far exceeds the ability of any middle-income group to adjust, forcing families to cut back on a range of expenses considered essential to maintaining their quality of life. A meal out, a regular haircut, a weekend trip, or simply a small monthly treat. The Consumer Price Index increased by a total of approximately 24% from 2020 to 2025, meaning that $100 in 2020 now has the purchasing power equivalent of just over $75. These numbers aren't on some distant chart. They're in your grocery basket, at the gas station, in your summer electricity bill. Americans don't need anyone to tell them they're getting poorer. They feel it every time they swipe their card. Essential costs, from food to energy, continue to rise steadily by 3% each year. Meanwhile, high interest rates have led to a sharp increase in borrowing costs, making credit card debt, car loans, and consumer debt anchors that are tied to already limited incomes. Nominal income increased, but disposable income decreased. A paradox that no one finds comfortable. Small businesses, which employ nearly half of the American workforce, are being squeezed by declining revenues and thin profit margins. They don't have room to raise salaries, even though they know their employees are struggling more. Therefore, flat wages are not just a result of inflation. They are a consequence of an ecosystem where small businesses are exhausted and workers are trapped between rising costs. As food prices rise but all essential costs increase, Americans are gradually shifting into a state of economic defense, minimizing spending and cutting out all non-essential expenses. This contraction isn't just happening to low-income households. Even the middle class, once stable and optimistic, now has to weigh every bill. That pressure paved the way for extremely minimalist lifestyle choices. An increasingly large segment is starting to consider RV living, not because they love adventure, but because it's one of the few ways to reduce rent, lower fixed costs, and extend financial viability in a context where everything is going up except wages. Flat wages, therefore, are not just a matter of money. It's a story about a changing quality of life structure, where even those with stable jobs feel like they are going backward. And when income couldn't keep up with expenses, the traditional middle-class housing model began to crack, leading us to the next level of crisis: RV living, where many Americans are rebuilding their lives within a few square meters of metal. As wages fail to keep pace with costs and purchasing power erodes year after year, Americans are beginning to seek new ways to survive. For a growing segment of the middle class, the answer is no longer a small apartment in the suburbs. It's an old RV parked in the supermarket parking lot. This is not a journey of adventure. It is a sign of a society shrinking to save itself. Rent has increased by over 30% in 6 years, and in many cities, increases of 5–8% in just 1 year have become commonplace. When the rate of house price increases far outstrips the rate of income growth, the traditional rental model, which was the cornerstone of the post-war era, becomes unsustainable for middle-income earners. Cumulative inflation of over 24% from 2020 to 2025 continues to push up the cost of living. Meanwhile, slow wage growth is forcing many households to cut deeply into fixed expenses that were once considered untouchable, such as rent. The largest expense in urban life becomes the most difficult burden to sustain. Revenue for small businesses on traditional commercial streets has plummeted, with some days not even covering electricity bills. A sign that cash flow on Main Street is drying up. As the shops that once defined the local rhythm began to retreat, housing costs became increasingly unjustifiable for the middle class, who were tightening their belts. The weakening of employment in small businesses, a sector that employs nearly 46% of the workforce, further limits the ability to maintain housing in expensive urban areas. An economy reliant on local jobs, but those jobs disappeared, forcing many to leave the place they once called home. In that context, RVs emerged as a viable survival option. Parking costs were significantly lower than apartment rent, and the flexibility of RVs allowed workers to move to areas with lower living expenses or better temporary jobs. This isn't a short-term trend. It's a natural reaction when fixed costs become unaffordable. This shift formed a semi-nomadic lifestyle, no longer tied to the local economy, no longer contributing steadily to small shops, and no longer maintaining consumption habits like before. This further narrows the customer base, which is the lifeblood of small businesses, and continues to weaken the local economic ecosystem. When living standards are reduced, spending behavior changes accordingly. Optional services, haircuts, dining out, boutique shopping, which are the lifeblood of small businesses, become the first expenses to be cut. RV living isn't just a housing option. It's an indicator of the resilience of the American middle class, an indicator that is constantly declining. And this change isn't just happening in difficult areas. Even regions once considered stable are experiencing similar shifts. Because when Americans enter survival mode, consumer behavior, from large to small, changes. As the cost of living continues to rise and real incomes shrink, Americans are no longer shopping on impulse. They buy to survive. This shift didn't happen overnight. It formed gradually with each bill, each card swipe, and each sacrifice that had to be made. A book priced at $13 on Amazon is sold for $40 at the local bookstore, a difference of nearly 3 times, forcing buyers to choose the cheaper option no matter how much they used to love supporting small businesses. Similarly, a $5 cookie has become the final straw for customers. Just cross that number, and most consumers immediately turn away, even though the store's raw material and operating costs are rising rapidly. Food prices in the US CPI have increased by over 20% since 2020. Energy prices rose sharply in 2021-2022 and remain high. Those numbers not only increase mandatory costs, but also consume the portion of the budget that was once allocated for small life rewards. A meal out, a haircut, or a self-gift after a long work week. Meanwhile, revenue for many small shops decreased compared to the previous year. Some stores are open all day, but the money they earn isn't even enough to pay the electricity bill. When consumers have no more spending room, stores that rely on impulse buys or buying to support are immediately put in the weakest position. The frequency of visiting restaurants, salons, and boutiques has significantly decreased. Expenses that were once symbols of a stable life are starting to be seen as luxuries, as things that can be cut when real income doesn't keep pace with the cost of living. Americans are turning to Amazon, Walmart, Costco, or low-cost coffee chains for shopping, not because they prefer the anonymity of large corporations, but because they need to stretch every dollar. The survival mode state shows that the people's top priority is no longer lifestyle or community meaning. It's preserving their wallets. When the majority of consumers enter such a defensive mode, small businesses, which rely on engagement and local character, lose their most important psychological advantage. In this context, small businesses are no longer seen as a familiar option, but as a luxury, only suitable when the budget allows. An economy where people have to live with a belt-tightening mentality even when working full-time. An economy where the romance of consumption has given way to the struggle for survival. When people have entered survival mode, any price outside their tolerance becomes fuel for the accumulating resentment. It's no longer a question of whether an item is expensive or cheap. It's the feeling that the market is taunting workers who are already struggling. A $15 iced latte plus $5 for syrup has become a symbol of what many describe as disrespectful to customers. Even those with decent incomes are starting to wonder if they're paying for coffee or for a cruel joke of the inflationary era. The hair service costs $1,600 for the first time and $485 every 4 weeks, pushing the total annual cost to an unimaginable level for the middle class. Services that were once the standard of self-care have now become figures beyond the reach of most workers. Meanwhile, the fact that a $23 Amazon product is resold by boutiques for over $100, with the tags cut and new labels attached, seriously damages customer trust. When people feel their values are being switched, loyalty to the local store quickly disappears. Retail electricity prices nationwide increased by 0.9% in 2024 after 2 years of strong growth, 12.1% in 2022 and 3.7% in 2023. Driving up operating costs for small businesses even as they struggle to retain customers. Some states have even seen commercial electricity prices increase by over 15–20% in just 1 year, creating huge cost disparities between regions. Not just electricity, insurance, materials, logistics, and labor all increased significantly between 2021 and 2023. These simultaneous increases erode the already thin profit margins of small businesses layer by layer. To survive, they were forced to raise prices. But each price increase was a slap in the face to consumers' already strained moods. When prices exceed affordability, people don't just turn away from small businesses. They lose faith. That belief used to be what helped small businesses survive recessions, pandemics, and market fluctuations. Now that trust is fractured, small businesses are not just losing revenue, they are losing the most important emotional support in the local economic structure. When consumers have entered a defensive state and spending is tight, small businesses, already vulnerable, are facing a series of policy pressures. This is no longer a market story. It's a story of macroeconomic decisions cascading down to the lowest levels of the US economy. The entire 32,000 job loss in the private sector came from small businesses, just as policy uncertainty increased, particularly with new tariff hikes. Tariffs increased the cost of importing raw materials, forcing businesses to pay extra for each order and shipment. But unlike large businesses, small businesses don't have the ability to negotiate prices. can't break down the supply chain or move suppliers overseas to reduce costs. The cost of capital also became another blow. After the interest rate hike cycle, interest rates on small business credit cards exceeded 20% per year at many financial institutions. A revolving loan, capital used to rotate inventory, purchase goods, and pay salaries, has now become a financial risk, making many shop owners hesitant to use it. As a result, the number of small business bankruptcy filings in the US has risen to its highest level in 6 years. This is not an isolated phenomenon. It reflects structural weakness as opportunities for capital turnover diminish and the cost of maintaining operations continues to balloon. While small businesses are having to cut jobs and downsize, large corporations are still maintaining growth in employment and revenue. It's not that they weren't affected, but that they had enough capital, scale, bargaining power, and networks to absorb the costs, and even expand their market share when smaller competitors left the market. This shift accelerates the concentration of economic power, a concern that has existed for many years. Policy shockwaves, increased tariffs, high borrowing costs, legal uncertainty created a dual effect. Input costs rose while output prices were suppressed due to weakened purchasing power. Small businesses are squeezed into a narrow gap between two opposing forces. If they sell at high prices, they lose customers. If they sell at low prices, they incur losses. In those circumstances, each new policy change, whether it's a modification of taxes, fees, or import regulations, becomes an additional squeeze on an already fractured structure. No single wave of change is enough to kill a small business, but cumulatively, these successive squeezes push them ever closer to the breaking point. After years of living with rising prices, shrinking food supplies, and expanding fixed costs, Americans are not only tightening their belts, they are starting to get angry. It's not anger at a single store or product, but at an entire system that makes even the most basic needs a burden. A $15 cup of coffee, a $5 cookie, or a $23 Amazon item resold for over $100 in a boutique. Those prices not only cause discomfort, they become a symbol of an exhausted tolerance. Consumers feel challenged, disrespected, and pushed to the limit with every smallest consumer decision. Cumulative inflation of over 24% since 2020 has pushed back living standards despite nominal income increases. It's a simmering anger. The feeling of I do a lot, but I'm getting poorer. A feeling that cannot be dispelled by technical explanations or beautiful economic charts alone. Rent increased by over 30% from 2019 to 2025, absorbing a significant portion of income into housing costs and significantly reducing the budget available for local businesses. That erosion makes expenses once considered normal, a meal out, a craft item, into luxury choices. It's no surprise that people are shifting strongly toward large platforms and chains. Over 80% of spending during Black Friday 2024-2025 went to Amazon and mass retailers. Americans buy where it's cheaper, faster, and less risky. That's not a disloyal choice, but defensive behavior in a volatile economy. When purchasing power is weak combined with negative sentiment, consumer habits change in the long term, buying cheap, buying fast, and buying from stable and least disappointing sources. It's an environment where small businesses find it very difficult to compete, not just on price, but because they have to regain trust that has been eroded by an entire period of economic volatility. This presents a bit of paradox. Small businesses, once victims of inflation, operating costs, and policies, are now victims of the anger these issues have created. To recover, they don't just need customers to return. They need to restore trust that has been shaken to its core. When you put all these pieces together, 124,000 jobs disappeared, wages didn't keep up with prices, people had to live in RVs, small businesses were devastated, and anger over prices spread. we see one thing clearly. This crisis didn't start on Wall Street. It started in the most ordinary neighborhoods, which were once the heart of the American middle class. Small businesses are not just job creators, they are the social glue. It's a place where people know each other's names. These are the shops that many Americans once built, were proud of, and considered symbols of a hard-working and kind America. If those businesses fall, America will not only lose millions of jobs, but also the very sense of stability that defined middle-class life for half a century. But in every crisis, there are always new paths. People adapt, the business adjusts, and new living and business models will emerge. The question is, how will America choose to change, heal itself, or let the market determine the future of the middle class? Can the middle class standard of living recover when wages don't keep pace with costs? Or are we witnessing a permanent transformation of the American dream? And if small businesses are truly the backbone of the economy, what will America look like when that backbone continues to crack? If you've seen these changes right in your neighborhood, please share your story in the comments section. This helps the community better understand the reality faced by millions of Americans. If this content offers a fresh perspective, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue creating in-depth analysis videos like this. This video is an analysis based on public data and reliable information sources. All data and opinions presented are for general informational purposes only and are not financial, investment, or policy advice. The views expressed in the video are neutral and are not intended to attack any individual, organization, or government.